Did you touch my son? Victoria Whitmore's voice split through the charity gala like shattered glass. The string quartet stopped mid-note. Champagne flutes hovered in trembling hands. At the center of the marble terrace, Naomi Carter froze beside a silver serving tray, her dark fingers still damp from the fountain water outside. Victoria stepped closer, heels clicking sharply against the stone, jaw tight, eyes burning with something colder than anger. I asked you a question? Naomi swallowed hard. He was scared, ma'am. Do not call me that after what you did. The air smelled like roses and expensive perfume, heavy beneath the glowing lanterns strung across the garden. Wealth shimmered everywhere. Diamond earrings. Tailored tuxedos. Soft laughter that had suddenly disappeared. Naomi could feel every eye landing on her uniform like pins pressing into skin. A maid. A black maid. Standing in the middle of people who looked through women like her every day. Victoria lifted the ruined ivory fabric hanging from her arm. Water stains spread across the silk like bruises. $20,000, she said, shaking the designer gown for everyone to see. You ruined it. Naomi's pulse climbed into her throat. Her shoulder still ached from kneeling beside the pool 10 minutes earlier, trying to calm the trembling boy whose cries nobody else had heard. Your son was having a panic attack, she said quietly. He was near the edge and I thought he might fall. Victoria laughed once. Sharp. Cruel. My son! Her smile never touched her eyes. You mean the same son who suddenly started screaming after you touched him? Guests exchanged uneasy glances. Someone whispered near the bar. Naomi caught only fragments. Staff. Boundaries. Lawsuit. Her stomach tightened. I did not hurt him, Naomi said softly. He was overwhelmed. I only wanted to help. Victoria took another step. Too close now. Help? She repeated. Girls like you always think crossing boundaries is kindness. Naomi lowered her gaze for half a second, forcing herself to breathe. She had learned long ago that survival sometimes sounded like silence. Her mother's hospital bills sat folded in her locker downstairs. 2 months overdue. Losing this job was not an option. But somewhere near the entrance doors, a little boy's frightened face kept flashing through her mind. The shaking hands. The shallow breathing. The way he had clung to her sleeve like he was drowning. He asked me not to leave him, Naomi said. I stayed because he was afraid. Victoria's expression darkened. Enough. Then, before Naomi could step back, Victoria grabbed the front of her maid uniform. Fabric stretched tight. Gasps rippled across the terrace. People like you, Victoria whispered, voice low enough to sting. Forget your place. The sound came fast. A sharp tear through cotton. One button bounced across the marble floor. Naomi instinctively grabbed the torn fabric against her chest as cold air brushed her shoulder. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. A waiter looked down. A woman near the fountain turned away. The humiliation settled into the night like smoke. Victoria straightened her dress and exhaled calmly, as if nothing had happened. Security, she said. Get her out of my house. Naomi stood frozen, heat rising behind her eyes, shame pressing heavy into her lungs. But she did not cry. She only whispered, barely audible. I was trying to protect him. Liar! Victoria snapped. Then, somewhere above them, came the sound of glass touching wood. Slow. Deliberate. Naomi looked up instinctively. On the second-floor balcony, half hidden behind the shadows of the mansion lights, a tall man stood motionless beside the railing, whiskey untouched in his hand. Charles Whitmore had seen everything. And judging by the look on his face, this was only the beginning. Everybody back inside, Charles Whitmore said, his voice low but sharp enough to cut through the frozen terrace. Nobody argued. Not the donors clutching champagne glasses. Not the musicians standing awkwardly beside silent violins. Even Victoria blinked, momentarily caught off guard. Naomi tightened her grip over the torn fabric at her shoulder, heart pounding so hard she could hear it above the fountain water. Charles descended the staircase slowly, polished shoes striking marble one measured step at a time. He looked at Naomi first. Not the ruined uniform. Not the trembling hands. Her face. Like he was trying to understand something everyone else had missed. Victoria recovered quickly, folding her arms. Charles, thank God. She put her hands on Oliver and destroyed my dress. Her voice sharpened. I already called security. Charles did not answer. The warm garden lights flickered against the hard lines of his face. Did she? He asked quietly. Victoria hesitated. Just enough for Naomi to notice. Excuse me? Victoria laughed once, too quickly. You heard me. Charles glanced toward Naomi. Did you hurt my son? Naomi swallowed. Her throat felt dry. No, sir. She looked down. He was scared near the pool. He could barely breathe. I just stayed with him until he calmed down. Victoria scoffed. Do not start performing now. But something shifted in Charles's expression. Tiny. Barely visible. Like a puzzle piece clicking somewhere deep behind his eyes. Because 20 minutes ago, he had passed the west hallway and heard something strange. Silence. Complete silence. The kind his son had not managed in years. Oliver had been laughing. Laughing. Charles turned toward the security guard near the hedge. Where is Oliver? Victoria answered first. Upstairs with Mrs. Givens. No, a small voice said from the garden doors. Everyone turned. Oliver stood barefoot against the warm glow of the mansion lights, pajama shirt wrinkled, one sleeve hanging low. His small hands shook slightly. But he was not crying. He was looking directly at Naomi. She stayed, he whispered. The entire terrace went still again. Victoria's face strained. Oliver, sweetheart, go inside. But he did not move. Instead, the boy stepped closer, blinking hard beneath the lights. Mommy yelled, he said quietly. But Naomi stayed. Naomi's breath caught. Charles crouched slowly, careful, like approaching something fragile. Buddy, he said softly. What happened near the pool? Oliver looked down at his fingers. Too loud, he whispered. Everything hurt. His voice trembled. I could not breathe. Charles's jaw tightened. He knew that voice. Panic. Overstimulation. Fear. Oliver glanced up again. Straight at Naomi. She sat on the ground. With me, he said. She told me to count lights. Victoria stepped forward fast. Enough. Her smile looked forced now. Tight. Controlled. He is confused. Nobody spoke. But the guests were watching again. Really watching this time. Naomi could feel the shift in the air. Judgment changing direction. Somewhere near the bar, someone lowered their phone. Charles rose slowly to his feet. Security, he said. Victoria exhaled, relieved too soon. Thank you. Then Charles looked directly at the head guard. Pull the camera footage from the west pool. Right now. Silence crashed over the terrace. Victoria stopped breathing for half a second. Naomi saw it. Tiny. But there. Fear. Real fear. Charles slipped one hand into his pocket, gaze never leaving his wife. Because something tells me, he said quietly, I have not heard the whole story. And for the first time that night, Victoria Whitmore looked terrified. The silence lasted exactly 11 seconds. Long enough for the entire terrace to feel it. Long enough for Victoria Whitmore to realize the night was slipping out of her control. Charles, she said, forcing a brittle smile. This is ridiculous. We have donors here. But Charles had already turned away. Security room, he said coldly. Now. The head guard nodded and disappeared through the side entrance. Around the terrace, phones began lighting up like tiny stars. Screens tilted upward. Guests pretending not to stare while staring harder than before. Naomi stood perfectly still near the fountain, fingers gripping the torn edge of her uniform. Her shoulders stung where the fabric had ripped, cool night air brushing against skin. She wanted to disappear. But Oliver had not moved. The little boy stayed near the doorway, eyes fixed on her like she was the only safe thing left in the house. Victoria noticed it too, and hated it instantly. "Oliver," she said sharply, kneeling now, voice suddenly sweet. "Come here, sweetheart." He flinched. Tiny. Barely noticeable. But Charles saw it. Naomi saw it too. The muscles in Charles's jaw tightened. "He said she helped him," Charles said quietly. "Maybe let him speak." Victoria stood quickly. Too quickly. "He is overwhelmed. You know how he gets." Her laugh sounded thinner now. Honestly, this girl probably misunderstood the situation. Girl. Naomi felt the word land harder than the cold air. Not Naomi. Not staff. Girl. Like she was something small. Replaceable. Easy to dismiss. She lowered her eyes and breathed slowly, counting like she had taught Oliver beside the pool. 4 lanterns. 3 marble columns. 2 fountains. Stay calm. Do not break. Then Oliver whispered something so soft most people missed it. She knew. Charles crouched again. "What do you mean, buddy?" The boy rubbed his sleeve nervously. "Too loud," he said. "Too bright." His breathing quickened. "I could not stop it." Naomi recognized the tremble immediately. Sensory overload creeping back in. Without thinking, she stepped forward once. "May I?" Victoria snapped around. "Do not touch my son again." Her voice cracked louder this time. Heads turned. Even the violinist near the hedge looked uncomfortable. Naomi stopped immediately. "I was only going to help him breathe," she said softly. "He counts reflections when he panics." Charles looked up fast. "Reflections?" Naomi hesitated. Every instinct told her to stay quiet. Stay invisible. But Oliver's fingers had started shaking harder. "Metal surfaces," she said carefully. "Pull lights. Windows. Silver trays." She glanced toward him. "It helps him focus when the noise gets too big." Oliver nodded instantly. "Fast. Certain." "She knows," he whispered again. Something changed in Charles's face. Something deeper than surprise. Because therapists had spent nearly 3 years trying to understand Oliver's panic triggers. Thousands of dollars. Evaluations. Specialists flying in from Chicago and Boston. None of them had mentioned reflections. Victoria folded her arms tighter. "Lucky guess," she said quickly. "That is all this is." But even she sounded unconvinced now. Then the head of security returned, tablet in hand. His face looked strange. Careful. Hesitant. "Sir," he said quietly to Charles, "you should probably see this privately." Victoria's shoulders dropped with relief too fast. Naomi noticed. Charles noticed too. "No," Charles said. His voice lowered into something dangerous. "Play it." The guard hesitated. Around them, guests leaned closer without meaning to. Champagne forgotten. Breathing shallow. The screen flickered under the garden lights. Grainy footage appeared. The West Pool. Empty chairs. Water reflecting gold lanterns. Then Oliver came into frame. Alone. Crying. Shaking near the edge. Naomi stepped closer instinctively, heart pounding against her ribs. She already knew what happened next. But Victoria suddenly looked pale. Really pale. And when the footage reached the moment Naomi ran toward the boy, the security guard stopped breathing for half a second and whispered, "Sir, there is something else on this video." The terrace went unnaturally quiet. Even the fountain sounded louder now, water striking stone in slow, cold echoes. Charles Whitmore did not blink. "Play it," he repeated, voice low enough to make people nervous. The head of security swallowed hard and tapped the screen. The footage rolled forward beneath the pale glow of lantern light. Oliver stood beside the pool, shoulders trembling violently, small hands pressed over his ears. Guests shifted uncomfortably behind Charles. Someone lowered a champagne glass without realizing it. Naomi felt her chest tighten. She remembered the panic in Oliver's eyes. The shaking. The silence nobody else noticed. Then the video changed everything. Oliver stumbled closer to the edge. One foot slipped. Gasps rippled through the terrace. Victoria inhaled sharply. "Oh my God!" Before anyone could speak, Naomi appeared in frame. Running. Fast. No hesitation. No pause to think. She dropped the silver tray mid-stride and knelt beside Oliver, keeping distance, speaking softly. Even through silent security footage, everyone could see the difference. Oliver's body stopped shaking. Slowly. Carefully. Naomi pointed toward reflections in the pool water, counting with her fingers. The little boy copied her. 1 light. 2 lights. 3. His breathing slowed. Guests exchanged looks. A woman near the hedge quietly whispered, "That is incredible." Victoria straightened instantly. "That does not prove anything," she snapped too quickly. "She still ruined my dress." Nobody answered her. This time. The silence felt heavier now. Judgment had changed shape. Then the security guard hesitated. "Sir?" His voice lowered. "This is the part one meant." Charles narrowed his eyes. "Keep playing." The footage skipped forward 30 seconds. Naomi carefully helping Oliver stand. Victoria entered frame near the poolside patio, heels sharp against stone. She looked furious before anyone had even spoken. Then the crowd on the terrace leaned closer. Victoria grabbed Oliver's wrist. Hard enough to make him recoil. Naomi stepped between them. Calm. Protective. Not aggressive. Just steady. Charles's face darkened. Nobody breathed. On the screen, Victoria pointed toward her ruined dress, clearly yelling. Naomi tried explaining something. Then came the moment. Crystal clear under the pool lights. Victoria glanced toward the party entrance. Toward the guests. Toward reputation. And then, with deliberate force, she reached down, grabbed the wet silk near the hem of her own designer gown, and tore it herself. The terrace exploded into whispers. "No!" Someone breathed. "She did that?" Another phone camera quietly switched on. Victoria went pale so fast it looked painful. "That is not what happened," she said immediately, voice cracking. "The angle is wrong." Charles did not move. Did not speak. He only stared at the screen as footage continued. Because moments later, Victoria shoved the torn fabric toward Naomi's hands. Like staging evidence. Like preparing a story before the crowd arrived. Naomi felt the humiliation all over again. The cold air on her shoulder. The stares. The shame. Except now, people were looking at her differently. Not pity. Respect. Real respect. Oliver's voice suddenly broke the silence. Small. Fragile. "Naomi saved me." Charles turned toward his son slowly. The little boy's eyes glistened beneath the mansion lights. "Mommy got mad," Oliver whispered. "But Naomi stayed." Victoria's breath caught. "Oliver, sweetheart, you are confused." But the boy shook his head immediately. "No." He looked straight at Charles now. "Naomi saw the loud." Charles froze. Saw the loud. 4 words. Simple. Childlike. But devastating. Because specialists had spent years trying to understand what Oliver experienced and failed every single time. Yet Naomi had understood it in minutes. Charles looked toward Naomi for the first time that night like he was really seeing her. The torn uniform. The trembling hands she kept hidden. The quiet dignity after public humiliation. "How did you know?" he asked softly. Naomi hesitated. Around them, nobody moved. Nobody even checked their phones anymore. "Because my little brother used to say the same thing," she said quietly. He said noise felt sharp. Like pain. Her voice almost cracked. "People thought he was difficult. He was just scared." Something shifted in Charles's expression. Something human. Something guilty. Victoria noticed it immediately, and panic flashed across her face. Real panic this time. "Charles," she said quickly, stepping closer. "Please. We can discuss this privately." But Charles was no longer looking at her. His gaze stayed locked on Naomi. Then, before anyone could speak again, the security guard looked back at the tablet, confusion spreading across his face. "Sir," he whispered slowly, "there is another camera angle." His throat tightened. "And I think someone else was near Oliver before Naomi got there." The terrace tightened like a held breath. "Someone else?" Charles Whitmore's voice came out quieter now, which somehow felt worse. The head of security zoomed into the footage, fingers unsteady against the tablet screen. Lantern light reflected across the metal frame, cold and sharp. Behind them, guests stood shoulder to shoulder, phones no longer hidden. Nobody cared about the gala anymore. Nobody cared about the donors or speeches or million-dollar pledges. Something bigger was happening. Something ugly. Victoria crossed her arms so tightly her knuckles turned pale. "This has gone far enough," she snapped. "We are humiliating this family over some servant's story." "Servant." Naomi lowered her eyes for a second. The word hit hard. Worse somehow than girl. She could still feel the torn fabric against her shoulder, still hear the soft rip of cotton replaying in her mind. But Oliver shifted closer to her. Quietly. Like instinct. Like trust. Victoria noticed. Immediately. Her face tightened. "Oliver," she said sharply, forcing calm back into her voice. "Come stand with Mommy." He did not move. The silence after that felt dangerous. Charles noticed too. So did the investors standing near the fire pit, watching with narrowed eyes. Men who funded companies worth billions suddenly looked deeply uncomfortable. Because power was changing direction right in front of them. The footage resumed. Another angle now. Side camera near the pool gate. Grainier. Colder. At first, nothing happened. Empty chairs. Flickering water. The distant hum of music from the ballroom. Then Oliver appeared again, crying harder this time, hands over his ears. Naomi's chest tightened. She remembered exactly how scared he looked. Then someone stepped into frame. A man. Tall. Suit jacket loosened. One hand holding a whiskey glass. He bent toward Oliver for less than 10 seconds. Charles leaned forward instinctively. "Who is that?" Nobody answered. Then came the audio. Faint. Distorted. But clear enough. "You need to stop embarrassing your mother." The man's voice cut through static. Oliver recoiled instantly. Hard. Hands shaking worse now. "No loud," the little boy whispered. The man sighed impatiently. "Grow up, buddy. You are ruining the night." Naomi stopped breathing. Across the terrace, Victoria went completely still. Charles slowly turned his head toward her. Too slowly. Too carefully. "Who," he asked quietly, "was near our son?" Victoria opened her mouth. Closed it again. Her composure cracked for the first time all night. I do not know." But Naomi knew. Her stomach dropped. Because she had seen that jacket before. Navy blazer. Gold cufflinks. Slight limp in the right leg. The same man who walked past the pool 20 minutes earlier without stopping while Oliver cried. Naomi hesitated. Every instinct screamed stay quiet. Staff did not accuse wealthy guests. Staff stayed invisible. Especially black women standing in torn uniforms in front of rich white people. Especially women already being blamed. Then Oliver whispered something so quietly she almost missed it. "Uncle Peter." Charles froze. Total silence crashed over the terrace. Even the fountain seemed quieter. Victoria inhaled sharply. Too sharply. "Oliver," she said fast, kneeling again. "Sweetheart, do not say things you do not understand." But Oliver's face crumpled. "He got mad," the boy whispered. "Too loud." Charles stood completely still now, whiskey forgotten in his hand. Naomi noticed his fingers trembling slightly. Real anger. The dangerous kind. Peter? Charles repeated. My brother? Victoria stood immediately. Defensive now. Cornered. He was only trying to calm Oliver down. Naomi looked up fast. That was not what happened. She remembered Oliver shrinking away. Remembered the panic getting worse after the man left. Before she could stop herself, she spoke. Quiet. Careful. Sir? Every eye turned toward her again. Pressure crashed back instantly. When I found Oliver, Naomi said softly. He kept repeating something. Charles looked at her sharply. What? Naomi swallowed hard. Her palms felt damp. He said. Her voice almost disappeared. He said someone told him you were angry because he ruins everything. Silence. Heavy. Suffocating. Charles's face drained of color. Victoria looked terrified now. Really terrified. Because somewhere near the back of the crowd, a man suddenly turned toward the garden exit. Fast. Too fast. Navy blazer. Gold cufflinks. And Charles saw him. Charles Whitmore moved before anyone else did. Peter. Just one word. Low. Controlled. Somehow colder than shouting. Across the terrace, the man in the navy blazer stopped near the garden gate, shoulders tightening beneath the lantern glow. Nobody chased him. Nobody spoke. The only sound came from the fountain spilling water into stone and the faint vibration of phones still recording. Naomi could feel every pair of eyes shifting between the brothers now. Between wealth and collapse. Between truth and reputation. Victoria stood frozen beside Oliver, fingers trembling against the fabric of her dress. She tried to speak twice before sound finally came out. Charles, please. But even she sounded smaller now. Less certain. The power she had carried all evening had begun slipping in quiet, terrifying pieces. Charles did not look at her. Stay right there, he said. To Peter. Calm. Too calm. Peter gave a stiff smile that did not reach his eyes. You are overreacting. His voice carried across the terrace like smoke. Smooth. Polished. Dangerous. The kid was overwhelmed. I tried helping. Nobody moved. Naomi noticed something strange immediately. Peter never once looked at Oliver. Not once. He only watched Charles. Calculating. Measuring. Like a businessman negotiating damage. Naomi tightened her grip around the torn fabric over her shoulder. Cold air still touched her skin, but somehow she felt steadier now. Quieter. The kind of calm born from surviving worse things than humiliation. Oliver shifted again, inching closer until his sleeve brushed Naomi's hand. Tiny movement. But the crowd noticed. So did Charles. The boy who barely let therapists near him was standing beside the maid everyone had dismissed an hour ago. Trusting her without hesitation. A woman near the back lowered her phone slowly. Another investor exchanged an uncomfortable glance with his wife. Something had changed. Naomi could feel it. The room was no longer deciding whether she mattered. They were deciding whether they had judged her completely wrong. Peter exhaled sharply. Honestly, Charles, he said, forcing a laugh, you are really taking the word of staff over family? Staff. Another label. Another reminder of place. But this time, it landed differently. Because nobody laughed with him. Nobody nodded. The silence that answered him felt expensive. Heavy. Embarrassing. Charles finally turned his head toward Naomi. Did Oliver say anything else? His voice softened unexpectedly. Naomi hesitated. Victoria looked at her immediately. Fear flashed fast across her face. Real fear. Like she already knew the answer. Naomi lowered her eyes briefly. She had spent years learning when to stay invisible. Years learning how quickly truth could cost someone like her everything. Rent. Jobs. Safety. Dignity. But Oliver's hand had quietly wrapped around 2 fingers of hers now. Small. Trusting. Naomi inhaled slowly. He kept repeating one thing, she said carefully. Peter shifted near the gate. Just slightly. But Charles noticed. What thing? Naomi looked toward Oliver first. Then back at Charles. He said, her voice lowered. Softer now. He said he did not want to go back to the quiet room. Silence. Absolute silence. Even the fountain suddenly felt distant. Charles frowned immediately. Quiet room? Victoria's face lost color. Peter looked away for the first time all night. Naomi felt Oliver tense beside her. Tiny fingers tightening around her hand. The little boy's breathing changed. Faster now. Nervous. Mommy says it helps, Oliver whispered suddenly. His voice shook. When I am bad. Nobody moved. Nobody even breathed right for a second. Somewhere near the hedge, a phone vibrated softly against glass. Charles slowly turned toward Victoria. No anger yet. Somehow worse than anger. Confusion. Hurt. The beginning of something breaking. What quiet room? He asked quietly. Victoria opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Peter took one careful step backward toward the exit. Charles, Victoria whispered. This is not what it sounds like. Then Oliver looked up at Naomi, eyes wet beneath the lantern light, and whispered the sentence that made her blood run cold. Do not let them lock me in there again. The words hit the terrace like a crack through ice. Do not let them lock me in there again. Oliver's voice trembled against the silence, small enough to miss if the entire crowd had not stopped breathing. Nobody moved. Not the investors near the fire pit. Not the women clutching crystal glasses. Even the fountain seemed quieter now, water slipping against stone in slow, cold echoes. Charles Whitmore stared at his son like he no longer recognized the ground beneath him. Lock you where? He asked softly. Too softly. The dangerous kind of soft. Oliver lowered his head instantly. Tiny shoulders folding inward. Naomi recognized the posture immediately. Fear. Learned fear. The kind children carried after being punished too many times for things they could not explain. Victoria stepped forward fast. Too fast. Charles, she said, voice thinning. He does not mean it like that. Peter shifted near the gate again. Nervous now. Sweat visible beneath the collar of his navy blazer. But Charles still did not look at either of them. His eyes stayed on Oliver. Waiting. Patient. For the first time in years, really listening. Buddy, Charles said carefully, kneeling lower. What quiet room? Oliver's breathing changed. Faster. Shallow. Panic creeping back beneath the lantern glow. Naomi noticed immediately. The tiny twitch in his fingers. The way his eyes darted toward the house. Toward escape. Toward fear. It is okay, Naomi said quietly. Every head turned back to her. Even Charles. Her voice stayed calm. Grounded. No panic. No performance. Just certainty. He does not need questions right now. Victoria laughed once, brittle and sharp. Oh, suddenly the maid is the expert? Nobody joined her. Not this time. Naomi crouched slowly to Oliver's height, careful not to crowd him. Can you look at the lights with me? She asked softly. Oliver blinked once. Then twice. He nodded. Tiny. Barely noticeable. But the crowd noticed anyway. Naomi pointed toward the silver railing beside the terrace stairs. Lantern light reflected softly against the metal. How many gold lights? She asked. Oliver swallowed. 4, he whispered. Good, Naomi said. Calm. Steady. And the fountain? 2 lights. His breathing slowed a little. Around them, people watched in stunned silence. Investors who had flown in private jets. Specialists who once claimed Oliver was impossible to regulate. All standing there while the woman in a torn Maid uniform calmly brought peace back into chaos in under 30 seconds. Charles noticed too. Something inside him shifted visibly. Guilt settling where certainty used to live. Victoria crossed her arms tighter. Defensive now. cornered. This is manipulative, she snapped. She is making us look bad. Naomi ignored her. Oliver, she asked softly, what happens in the quiet room? The boy hesitated. His fingers tightened around Naomi's sleeve. Dark, he whispered. Several guests exchanged shocked looks. No windows. His voice trembled harder now. If I cry too loud. He stopped. Silence swallowed the terrace whole. Charles slowly rose to his feet. Tall. Still. Terrifyingly calm. Victoria, he said quietly. What room is he talking about? Victoria's composure finally cracked. You are never here, she snapped suddenly, voice echoing across the marble. Gasps rippled through the crowd. You leave me to handle everything. Tears sat sharp in her eyes now. Anger. Shame. Fear collapsing together. Do you know what it is like trying to manage him? Oliver flinched instantly at the rise in her voice. Naomi moved subtly in front of him without thinking. Protective. Quiet. Charles noticed that too. And for the first time all night, his expression changed when he looked at Naomi. Not staff. Not maid. Something closer to trust. Something heavier than gratitude. Then Oliver whispered something so quietly only Naomi heard it at first. Her face changed immediately. Tiny shift. Shock hidden beneath composure. Charles caught it. What? He asked quickly. Naomi hesitated. For the first time all night, she looked uncertain. Sir, she said carefully, I think your son is trying to tell us something else. Her eyes drifted toward Peter near the gate. Still frozen. Still sweating. Something about what happens when you are not home. Charles turned slowly toward his brother. And this time, Peter stopped pretending not to be afraid. Peter stopped moving. Completely. The lantern light caught the sweat gathering near his collar, turning the edges of his face pale beneath the gold glow. Nobody on the terrace spoke. Nobody needed to. The silence had changed now. No longer tense with suspicion. Heavy with realization. Charles Whitmore stared at his younger brother like he was seeing a stranger standing inside his own family. What? Charles asked quietly. Does my son mean? Peter forced a laugh that collapsed before it landed. Come on, Charles. His voice sounded thinner now. Nervous. Kids imagine things. Nobody believed him. Not anymore. Even the investors standing near the marble staircase had stopped pretending this was private family business. Phones stayed lowered now, forgotten. Because this no longer felt like gossip. It felt like truth arriving too late. Oliver shifted closer to Naomi again, small fingers wrapped around the torn sleeve of her uniform. He had chosen his safe place. And everyone could see it. Victoria noticed too. Her face tightened. Before softening into something worse. Shame. Real shame. Oliver, she whispered carefully, kneeling again, but slower this time. Softer. Baby, Mommy did not know you were scared. Oliver did not look at her. He kept staring at the ground. I told Uncle Peter, he whispered. He said Daddy gets tired of broken things. The words landed hard enough to empty the air from the terrace. A woman near the back covered her mouth instinctively. Charles looked like someone had reached inside his chest and pulled something apart. Broken? He repeated softly. Oliver nodded once. Tiny. So I had to be quiet. Victoria closed her eyes immediately, one trembling hand covering her mouth. Tears threatened now. Unwelcome. Uncontrolled. Peter stepped backward again. This is ridiculous, he muttered quickly. He misunderstood. But his voice had lost authority. Lost shape. Lost power. Naomi noticed something strange then. Oliver's breathing had started changing again. Faster. Uneven. Too many people. Too much pressure. Too many voices layered over each other. She crouched slowly beside him, calm as still water. Hey, she whispered gently. Can you help me count again? Oliver looked up immediately. Trust. Instant trust. How many lights on the fountain? She asked softly. 3, he whispered. Good. Her voice stayed warm, grounded. And the silver rail? 4. His shoulders loosened. Just enough. Charles watched everything in complete silence. Watched the woman his wife humiliated somehow steady his son in seconds while years of specialists had struggled. Watched the same woman stand in torn fabric and still protect the child of people who had hurt her. Something shifted visibly inside him. Regret settling where judgment used to be. Slowly, Charles turned toward Naomi. The crowd noticed the movement immediately. Investors straightened. Guests went quiet. Even Victoria looked up through wet eyes. Charles stepped closer. Careful now. Respectful. Miss Carter, he said quietly. Not maid. Not staff. Not girl. I owe you an apology. The entire terrace froze again. Naomi looked up, surprised despite herself. Charles swallowed hard. My son trusted you. His voice roughened. And instead of asking questions, his eyes flicked briefly toward the torn fabric at her shoulder. Guilt crossed his face so fast it almost hurt to watch. You were humiliated in my home. Nobody looked away. Not anymore. Because for the first time that night, power had bent in the opposite direction. Naomi hesitated. Years of surviving taught her caution. Rich apologies sometimes disappeared by morning. But Oliver squeezed her hand gently. Tiny reminder. Stay. Victoria suddenly stood, tears finally slipping free. I did not know, she whispered, voice shaking now. I thought. She stopped. Could not finish. Because somewhere beneath the shame, she had realized something unbearable. She had punished the only person who actually understood her son. Naomi looked at her for a long second. No anger. No triumph. Just tired compassion. He was scared, Naomi said softly. That is all. Victoria lowered her head immediately. The words somehow hurt more than blame ever could. Then, from the edge of the terrace, the head of security cleared his throat quietly. Nervous again. Sir, he said to Charles. There is one more thing. Everyone turned. The tablet screen still glowed beneath the cold lantern light. There is footage, he said carefully. From the basement hallway. Peter stopped breathing. The terrace stayed silent long after the words landed. Basement hallway. Nobody moved at first. Even the fountain sounded distant now, softer somehow, like the night itself had stopped to listen. Peter looked toward the garden exit again, but there was nowhere left to go. Not with investors watching. Not with cameras still glowing faintly in trembling hands. Charles held out his hand. Show me. The security guard turned the tablet slowly. Cold light reflected against Charles's face as footage flickered alive. Basement corridor. Dim lighting. Concrete walls. A narrow door near the end of the hall. The timestamp read 3 days earlier. Oliver appeared first. Small. Barefoot. Shoulders folded inward. Peter stood beside him, impatient. Victoria entered frames seconds later, exhausted, rubbing her forehead. Nobody on the terrace breathed. The audio was faint but enough. Just. For a little while. Victoria whispered in the footage. Tired. Frustrated. Human. Not cruel. Just overwhelmed. Peter stepped closer to Oliver. Your father only loves peace, he said quietly. You want him to stay around? Stop making problems. Oliver shrank immediately. Even on screen, the fear looked unbearable. Victoria hesitated near the doorway. Like she wanted to stop it. Like she almost said something. But she did not. The footage ended with Oliver disappearing behind the door. Silence spread across the terrace so completely it almost hurt. Victoria covered her mouth, tears falling freely now. I thought. Her voice cracked. I thought he just needed quiet. She looked at Oliver like she was seeing his fear for the first time. I did not know. Charles stood perfectly still. No shouting. No anger. somehow harder to watch. Years of missed moments settling behind his eyes all at once. The meetings. The flights. The distance. While someone else had taught his son fear inside his own home. Peter finally broke. "I was trying to help," he said quickly. Defensive. Desperate. "You never understood how hard he is to manage." Charles turned slowly toward him. "Calm now. Terrifyingly calm. Leave. Just one word." Peter blinked. "Charles, leave my house." The finality in his voice ended the argument before it started. Nobody defended Peter. Nobody moved to stop him as he walked toward the gate alone, shoes scraping quietly against stone. The powerful man who arrived laughing hours ago left without anyone watching him go. Victoria sank slowly into a chair near the terrace edge, shaking now. "I failed him," she whispered. Oliver hesitated. Small hands trembling. Unsure. Naomi crouched beside him gently. "You did not do anything wrong," she said softly. "None of this was your fault." He looked up at her immediately. Trust still there. Safe again. Charles exhaled slowly and crossed the distance between them. The crowd shifted instinctively, giving space. Respect replacing curiosity. "Miss Carter," he said quietly, voice rougher than before. "I cannot undo what happened tonight." His eyes flicked toward the torn uniform at her shoulder. Shame passed across his face. "But I will spend a long time trying to make it right." Naomi looked down for a moment. The night air had turned colder. The adrenaline fading. Exhaustion settling into her bones. She could have been angry. Could have demanded more. But instead she looked toward Oliver. The little boy now standing closer to his parents than before. "He just needs someone who sees him," she said softly. Victoria lowered her head immediately, crying harder at the kindness she probably did not deserve. Charles nodded once. Quiet. Grateful. The guests began lowering their phones. One by one. Nobody seemed interested in gossip anymore. The story had changed. A maid had walked into the night invisible, and somehow became the only person who saw what everyone powerful had missed. Later, as the crowd slowly disappeared and lanterns dimmed against the dark sky, Naomi stood near the front gate holding the edges of her torn uniform together. The house behind her had gone strangely still. Then soft footsteps crossed the driveway. Oliver. He held something carefully in both hands. A small silver name badge from her uniform. Bent from where it had fallen earlier. "You forgot this," he whispered. Naomi smiled for the first time all night. Small. Tired. Real. She crouched and gently clipped it back where the fabric had torn. Oliver stared at it for a second, then quietly wrapped his arms around her. No panic. No fear. Just stillness. From the front steps, Charles and Victoria watched without speaking. The lantern light reflected softly in their eyes as the cold night finally settled around them. And for the first time in a very long time, the Whitmore house felt quiet for the right reason.